Welcome to JEC 221 Ethics, Week 3 lesson. From our previous discussion, we have discussed sources of authorities. So we had law, religion, and culture. So it is sometimes thought that one should not rely actually on external authority. So in our previous discussion, we discussed about those three external authority that we may make as basis, no? But as we have ended our discussion last week, we have come to the answer to what sources of authority could be used in ethics, and that is reasoning. So yun, sometimes we cannot or we should not rely on those external authority to tell ourselves what the standards of moral valuation are. But instead, sometimes we should turn inwards, or we should trust ourselves, our own opinion, our own thinking as for our standards of moral valuation. In this lesson, we will look into three theories about ethics that center on self, or it centers on the self. Those are subjectivism, psychological egoism, and ethical egoism. Now let us start with the first theory we have. We have subjectivism. So the starting point of subjectivism is the recognition that the individual thinking person, or us as a person, we the subject from subjectivism. So tayo yung subject, no? So we are at the heart of all moral valuation. So tayo yung tayo yung center ng moral valuation. So she or he or you are the one who is confronted with the situation and burdened with the need to make a decision or judgment. So yun, the center or heart of moral valuation is you, the individual, you as a subject. So from this point, subjectivism leads to the more radical claim that the individual, the subject, is the sole determinant of what is morally good or bad, right or wrong. So ikaw, as a person, you as an individual, being the subject for judgment or for decision making, is ikaw mismo yung determinant or makakapagsabi sa sarili mo kung ano yung good or bad, kung ano yung right or wrong. So we have here a number of clichés na I think familiar to you that would echo the idea of subjectivism. So we have here 4 statements. Now these 4 statements, yes, they're quite familiar to us. Maybe in one way or another, we have thought about these things or these ideas. And these statements could represent the idea of subjectivism. So we have here, no one can tell me what is right and wrong. No one knows my situation better than myself. I am entitled to my own opinion. It is good if I say that it is good. So there is something appealing about these statements, no? Kasi they seem to express a sense of personal independence, no? In one way or another, actually, myself, I have used some of these statements, no? Kasi yun nga, it expresses a sense of personal independence, expresses a sense of self-confidence, mga ganun, no? But a close look at these statements, kung titingnan natin ng maigi, no? They may reveal problems. And when you are able to see that problem, that's the time that we can also see the problem problems of subjectivism. So, isa-isahin natin itong 4 na statements na ito kung bakit they seems to be problem in subjectivism. So, in discussing these 4 statements, malalaman natin ano nga ba yung possible or ano yung problema na mayroon yung subjectivism as a theory in ethics. Okay, first we have this statement. No one can tell me what is right and wrong. So, walang makakapagsabi sa akin ano yung tama at ano yung mali. Kasi that's the sense of subjectivism. You as an individual is the subject or the center of moral valuation. Diba? Na-mention ko nga kanina sa subjectivism, ikaw lang sa sarili mo yung makakapag-judge or makakapag-decide whether an action that you are to make is right or wrong. So, in a sense, there is some validity to this statement, no? Tama naman. Sometimes, in a sense, tama siya. Kasi, sabi nga nila, kung hindi mo lang iano sa sarili mo yung isang bagay, hindi mo ipipilit ba? O hindi mismo ikaw yung mag-a-act. Walang mangyayari. Kahit na sabihin ng buong mundo sa'yo na this is right, this is wrong. But if you yourself decided on the other way around, still, ikaw pa rin yung masusunod as a person. So, no one can compel another, of course, to accept a certain values judgment if you, yourself, does not follow with it or does not concur with it. Yun nga, kahit na lahat ng tao sa paligid mo sabihin sa'yo na mali yan, but you as a person, ikaw lang yung makakapagsabi nun if tama ba siya or mali. It's up to you, it depends on you, kung makikinig ka ba sa kanila or susundin mo yung tinitubok ng puso mo. No? So, however, we know that this statement, of course, cannot be taken absolute. Hindi natin pwedeng sabihin na this statement is 100% factually correct, 100% true, no? Kasi we realize in many instances that we had maintained an idea or an opinion that further discussion reveals it was actually erroneous. So, may mga instances kasi sa buhay natin na so tigira na sa huli ka sa Orian so kasindit or sa kasindit sa Orian, no? May mga times na we decided on a certain decision. So we made a choice. But at the end of the day, marirealize natin na ay mali pala yung pinili kong decision or mali pala na ito yung sundin ko, no? Kaya hindi natin pwedeng sabihin na this is absolutely correct. So we realize that we can be mistaken. Of course, tao lang tayo, no? So nobody's perfect, sabi nga nila. So we can be mistaken and of course we can also be corrected by others, no? So yun. Itong statement na to, hindi natin siya makakonsider na absolute. Kasi unang-una, nature ng tao ang magkamali. Walang taong perpekto. No? Though, yun nga, the decision making it's up to us. According to subjectivism, we are the subject. So we are the one to decide and we are the one to judge. But then again, we can always be corrected by others. Kasi itong mga tao sa paligid natin, they may have experienced what you are about to experience. Kaya sila nakakapagbigay ng advices or nakakapagbigay ng guidelines or tip in order for you to follow. Kasi alam nila kung ano yung pwedeng mangyari sa'yo. Lalo na yung mga parents natin, hindi ba? Yung linya na papunta ka pa lang, pabalik na ako, or papunta ka pa lang, pabalik-balik na ako. That is actually true, no? Kasi in this life, hindi imposible na magkaroon ng similar experiences yung mga tao, no? So yun, why is this not also possibly applicable when we are speaking of ethics? No? So hindi siya pwedeng maging source of authority in ethics, something like that. So let us move on to another statement. No one knows my situation better than myself. Totoo naman, di ba? Walang nakakaalam ng sitwasyon mo, ng nararamdaman mo, kung hindi ikaw mismo sa sarili mo. Once again, in a sense, there is some validity to this statement, no? This particular person who is put in a certain situation, nasa isang situation siya, na kailangan niya mag-decide, no? He has a knowledge of the factors that affect her situation and decision. So, halimbawa, ikaw ay nasa sitwasyon kung saan kailangan mong mag-decide, kailangan mong mamili. So, of course, you yourself know na ano yung magiging effect kapag nag-decide ka. You are knowledgeable of the factors na pwedeng makaapekto sa situation at saka sa decision mo. Kasi ikaw nga mismo yung nakakaalam kung ano yung situation mo. For example, if you are in a decision making, if you choose this option, of course, if you are a sound person, a reasonable thinking person, at that moment, may isip mo na agad na if I choose this decision, ito yung possible na effect or possible na outcome. Kasi nga, once again, walang nakakaalam ng sitwasyon mo kung hindi ikaw lamang. At of course, ikaw din yung nakakaalam kung ano yung maapektuhan sa'yo. No? But to take this fact as a ground for not listening to others is to have a mentality that imagines that one's own situation or concern is so personal and unique that there is no way another person can possibly understand you and give you any meaningful advice. But again, we cannot say that this situation is absolute. No, as I've mentioned earlier, yes, it's possible na we have our own unique experiences, but in one way or another, may mga tao na dumaan na or pinagdaanan yung kung ano yung sitwasyon mo ngayon, na they can possibly understand you. And better, if they can give you meaningful advice. But again, those advices are up to you if you are going to follow them or not, no? But does not it make greater sense to recognize the reality that, yun nga, many human experiences are common and that others may have something useful to suggest to your situation or to your decision making, no? So, mas mabuti pa rin yun. Okay, so let us move on to the next statement. I am entitled to my own opinion. I think this is very overused, no? Lagi natin sinasabi ito. So here, once again, of course, it has a valid point, but this valid point is often misused. Lagi natin itong sinasabi. Lagi natin itong sinasagot or kino-comment. Pero may mga times na it is used wrongly or mali yung pagkakagamit, no? Of course, certainly, each person has the right to believe what she believes and has the right to express this. Lahat tayo ay entitled sa opinion natin. We have all the right to choose what we believe and to express what we believe. Lalo na ngayong panahon ng election, no? May kanya-kanya tayong paniniwala, may kanya-kanya tayong bet or manok sa pagka-presidente, no? So we cannot tell other person na they are right or they are wrong. Again, kasi of course we have our own, we are entitled with our own opinion. We have the right to choose what we believe, and also we have the right to express this belief. But this right is often stubbornly misconstrued. O minsan, nami-misuse or nasasobrahan tayo sa paggamit dito sa right na ito, no? Sa some kind of immunity from criticism and correction. So yun, nami-misuse itong statement na ito, itong idea na ito, yung right natin to our own opinion. Especially kapag, excuse me, halimbawa, no, you are being criticized or you are in a debate, no? So, kapag may mag-correction sa'yo, kadalasan, yung mga wala nang maisagot, ito na lang yung sasabihin nila na, I am entitled to my own opinion. Wala kang pakialam, opinion ka to. Diba? Madalas natin gamitin yon kapag wala na tayong mairebat, wala na tayong masagot doon sa sa kausap natin, halimbawa, no? So, halimbawa, no, mabigay tayo ng halimbawa. This person has his opinion na para sa kanya, ang mga babae ay inferior sa mga lalaki. So naniniwala itong taong ito, halimbawa, no, na mas lamang daw yung mga babae kaysa lalaki. And this person happened to be owner of, let's say, a company. No? So what if this employer pays his female employees less than the male employees, no? Mas parehas lang yung trabaho ng mga empleyado niya pero mas malaki yung sweldo ng mga lalaki kasi yun nga, yung opinion niya, yung paniniwala niya na mas superior or mas lamang yung mga lalaki kaysa mga babae. So in this case, isn't he entitled to his opinion? No? What if ikaw, na employee ka, babae ka, tapos empleyado ka niya, tapos yun, nalaman mo na mas mataas yung sweldo ng mga lalaking kasama mo despite of having the same work. So, okay lang sa'yo yun? Of course, hindi mo tatanggapin yun, di ba? Kasi walang equality, unfair. Yun yung iisipin mo. But, what if yun, magreklamo ka sa kanya, then he will tell you na, I am entitled to my own opinion and this is my own opinion. Isn't he really entitled to his own opinion? No? So to insist in one's right into having opinion, whatever this happen to be, is to exhibit a closed-mindedness that rightly invites censure from someone trying to think more critically about values. So, I don't think that, you have to insist that, right? No? Kasi, that kind of thinking na this is my opinion, this should be the right thing to do, or this is the best decision because this is my belief, that exhibits a closed-mindedness. No? So, yun. Let us proceed to the last statement for the subjectivism. It is good if I say that it is good. So, with this line, we get to the heart of the problem with subjectivism. So, dito natin makikita yung pinaka-problema doon sa theory ng subjectivism, no? Kasi, this statement, it implies that, it's my personal consideration, it's my personal thinking, so this should be good. Kung titingnan natin, napaka-bias, no? Kasi, kung ano lang yung sa'yo, yun lang yung tama. And actually, when we tend to meet people with this kind of mindset, of course, naiinis din tayo. Kasi we'll instantly think that something is wrong with this person, 'di ba? Halimbawa, no, may kaibigan ako. Tapos papakilala ko sa iyo. Hello, this is Mary. She's a very good person kasi ganito, ganyan. No? But the problem is you have met Mary in other circumstances na kung saan Mary exhibits you negative behaviors. So, for example, I'm the person, I told you that Mary is a good person. So, what makes Mary a good person? So, pwede bang basihan lang ng pagkamabait niya is yung testimony ko, yung sinabi ko? Pwede bang maging basis yun na kahit na anong maling ginawa ni Mary, halimbawa, o anong negative thing or negative behavior na napakita niya, ako pa rin yung masusunod kasi ako yung nagsabi? Pwede ba yun? No? So I think there is something problem with that. So what could be the basis for saying a person is good? Dahil ba na-meet mo na siya ng isang araw or ng 1 year, tas mabait siya sa'yo? Does it make her good person na agad? What if sa ibang tao, iba din yung ugali niya? No? So, this renders subjectivism an unsustainable view for someone who is interested in ethics. So, it takes the fact that I am the subject making the evaluation and I am the subject, I am making the evaluation and uses this fact as the very basis for that evaluation. But when I, as subject, I am asking what is right or wrong, good or bad, with subjectivism, there is no other basis that I can look forward. So then again, yun, the subjectivism, pinaka-center of moral standard for moral valuation lies or determined by you as the subject, you as a person. But yun nga, na-mention natin, yung mga issues or problems with this kind of theory. Yes, we cannot deny the fact that it's up to us as a person, as the subject, on how are we going to decide on a certain situation or how are we going to act on a certain situation. But then again, we also have to consider in ethics, we also have to consider external factors. We also have to consider other people. No? But then again, sa subjectivism, the standard for moral valuation lies or determined by the subject or the person. Okay? So that's all about subjectivism. Let us move on to the next theory. Okay, so the next theory we have is the psychological egoism. Let us consider another cliche, another statement, no? So it goes like this. Human beings are naturally self-centered. So all our actions are already motivated by self-interest. Sa psychological egoism, ito yung stand nila. No? Na according to them, lahat ng tao naturally inborn na self-centered. Lahat daw ng actions natin, lahat ng decision making natin is nakabase sa self or motivated by our own interest, no? So this is the stance taken by psychological egoism. So psychological egoism is a theory that describes the underlying dynamic behind all human actions. So this theory describes the reason behind our actions, behind our decision making as a human. So as a descriptive theory, if you could still remember, in ethics we have normative theories and descriptive theories. So psychological egoism is under the descriptive theory. So as a descriptive theory, it does not direct one to act in a particular way. So instead, sinasabi niya na there's already a reason or a basis, underlying basis, kung paano mag-decide or mag-act ang isang tao. No? As in, diretso niya sinasabi na kahit anong sabihin mo, the reason behind your action, the reason behind your decision making is your self-interest. So the ego or self has its desires and interests, and all our actions are geared towards satisfying this interest. So yun yung paniniwala ng mga psychological egoist. Lahat ng decision making natin, lahat ng actions natin, whether aminin natin sa sarili natin or hindi, lahat yon ay motivated by our self-interest. No? If we are going to apply this in our basic or day-to-day actions, pwedeng tama ito, no? Kasi halimbawa, ako personally, I watch a movie or read a book kasi gusto ko. That is self-interest. My action is motivated by self-interest. I will go outside or travel somewhere because I enjoy that. Self-interest again. I take a certain course in college because I think it will benefit me. Again, that is self-interest. Or I join a specific organization or I applied in a certain company because I believe I will get something good out of it. Again, that is self-interest. So we do things in pursuit of our own self-interest all the time. In our day-to-day basis, halos lahat ng actions natin is grounded by our self-interest. So lahat naman ng ginagawa natin, kaya natin ginagawa yun kasi it will benefit us for ourselves, no? But what about the type of behaviors that we do that are directed toward the other, no? Yung mga actions ba na ginagawa natin para sa ibang tao? Considered ba yun na na self-interest din? So let us consider an example. So let's have an example here. An act of generosity, yung pagiging mapagbigay ba, no? In which someone, halimbawa, tinulungan mo si classmate mo doon sa, let's say, assignment niya. Instead of instead of playing games, playing Mobile Legends, mga ganon. Or someone makes use of her free time to, let's say, help other people, no? Though yung action mo is directed toward other, sa mga psychological egoist, they would still maintain that behind your actions, behind your generosity, act of generosity, is a self-serving desire. Sa psychological egoist, naniniwala sila na kahit na yung action mo is for other people, still behind that is nandoon pa rin yung self-serving desire, yung self-interest, no? Even if you do not acknowledge it or even you are unconscious of it, still behind your act of generosity is self-interest. Bakit, no? Pwede kasi na halimbawa, tinulungan mo yung friend mo doon sa assignment niya kasi pwedeng you're trying to impress that person na para makita niya na magaling ako. Again, that is self-interest. Or pwede rin na kaya ka tumutulong sa mga mahihirap, halimbawa, kasi nagigilty ka para ma-relieve yung sense of guilt mo na mas may kaya ka kaysa sa kanila. And that is self-interest. No? So the idea that whether or not the person admits it, aminin mo man o hindi, lahat daw ng action natin according to psychological egoist is always motivated by self-interest, by self-serving desire. So yun yung belief ng psychological egoism, na all of our actions, it may be directed to other, we may be conscious of it, we may admit it or not, lahat ng action natin ay motivated by self-interest. For the last theory, we have ethical egoism. So, ethical egoism differs from psychological egoism, no? Although parehas silang egoism, no? In that, ethical egoism do not suppose all our actions are already inevitably self-serving. Sa ethical egoism, hindi niya kiniklaim agad na yung action natin is out of self-interest. Instead, sa ethical egoism, it prescribes that we should make our own ends, our own interest, as the single overriding concern. So we may act in a way that is beneficial to others, but we should do that only if it ultimately benefits us. So this theory acknowledges that everyone ought to put herself at the center. So one should consider herself as the priority and not allow any other concerns, such as the welfare of other people, to detract from this pursuit. So, though pareha sila na about self, sense of self, as I've mentioned from the beginning na itong tatlong topic na ito, tatlong theories na ito, they all centers to our self as the source of moral, as standard of moral valuation. So, kung sa psychological egoism, pinipilit talaga nila or dinidescribe nila yung actions ng isang tao as motivated by self-interest. Sa ethical egoism naman, piniprescribe or sinasuggest nila na dapat daw Lahat ng actions natin, lahat ng gagawin natin, at the end of it, tayo yung magbe-benefit. Sa psychological egoism is talagang ini-insist nila na hindi, kahit ano yung isipin mo, kahit anong gawin mo, yung actions mo ay purely out of your self-interest. Yun yung sa psychological egoism. But in ethical egoism, they tell you to to make yourself as priority. Sa ethical egoism, excuse me, nire-recommend sa'yo na dapat unahin mo yung sarili mo or dapat prioritize mo yung sarili mo sa lahat ng gagawin mong decision or action na at the end of it, ikaw dapat yung mag-benefit. So again, let us compare the last two theory. We have psychological and ethical egoism. Psychological egoism states that self-interest motivates all human actions. So, gini-claim talaga ng psychological egoism na lahat ng actions natin are motivated by self-interest. While in ethical egoism, it states that all people should or ought to be motivated by self-interest for their actions. Sa ethical egoism, dapat daw lahat ng actions natin ay motivated by self-interest. So nakita niyo yung difference? Psychological egoism, everybody is ultimately motivated solely by his or her self-interest. Lahat ng tao ay motivated by self-interest. Sa ethical egoism naman, it prescribes selfishness or self-interest to be the ultimate motivation for individual actions. So, kung sa psychological, as in gi-claim agad, sa ethical egoism, piniprescribe nila. They are recommending self-interest to be your ultimate motivation in decision making or in doing your actions. In psychological egoism, it describes the reason for human behavior and action. Dinidescribe niya na ang reason behind your action, behind your decision making, is because of your self-interest. While in ethical egoism, yun nga, nire-recommend. It recommends how human behavior for individual actions. Nire-recommend nyo na ito dapat yung i-follow mo. Again, psychological egoism directly states that self-interest must be the ultimate motivation behind our actions. In ethical egoism, it recommends self-interest to be the motivation for our actions. So, yun yung difference nila. I hope maintindihan natin, no? Okay, it's now time for your assessment. For this week's assessment, this is the scenario. Imagine, you and your best friend have been arrested. Halimbawa lang, no? Na you have been arrested, kayo ng best friend mo. The jailer gives you the following options. So, ito yung option na binigay sa inyo ng yung magkukulong sa inyo. Halimbawa, no? If you and your best friend, ito yung option number 1. If you and your best friend both confess, you will both get 5 years in prison. Kapag parehas kayong umamin doon sa kasalanan na inaakusa sa inyo, parehas kayong makukulong ng 5 taon. Option number 2. If you confess but your best friend does not confess, your best friend gets 10 years in prison and you are immediately set free. If ikaw yung nag-confess, umamin ka, pero yung best friend mo hindi umamin, yung best friend mo makukulong siya ng 10 years. Tapos ikaw, pakakawalan. But, third option, pag ikaw yung hindi umamin, pero yung best friend mo umamin, siya yung makakalaya. Tapos ikaw naman yung makukulong ng 10 years. And lastly, last option, if walang umamin sa inyo, you will be set free after 1 year. Pag parehas kayong hindi umamin, after 1 year, is pwede na kayong makalaya. So ito, pipili kayo dito sa 4 na option na binigay ng jailer if you are in the situation. But here's a twist, no? The jailer tells you that your best friend is being offered the same deal. but you cannot communicate with him or with her. So parehas kayo ng option, parehas yung option na binigay sa inyo. Ang problema, hindi kayo makapag-communicate. Magkaibang place kayo nilagay, pero parehas yung option. Hindi mo directly malalaman ano yung pipiliin niya at hindi niya rin malalaman ano yung pipiliin mo. So, from the options that is given, yung 4 na yon, alin doon yung pipiliin mo? And why? So, pipili kayo doon sa 4 na option if you are in a situation. Then, you have to explain the reason behind your decision. Again, as usual, submit your answer through the Edmodo assignment post for this week's assessment. So, yun yung assessment nyo. Sa Edmodo lang yung answers nyo. Mag-post lang ako ng assignment post for week 3. And I think that's it. That ends today's discussion. I hope meron tayong naintindihan. For this week, wala muna tayong bonus question. But you are advised, you are encouraged to study our lessons. Kasi next week, magkakaroon na po tayo ng prelim examination. So, the scope of our examination is yung 3 topic na na-discuss natin. Una is yung basic concept about ethics. Pangalawa, yung sources of authority. Din pangatlo itong theories about ethics. So, dyan lang ako kukuha ng questions. You may ask, ma'am, anong type of exam? Magbibigay ako ng objective type. Yung pwedeng merong multiple choice, pwedeng maglagay ako ng true or false, or identification, pwede akong maglagay niyan. Kaya make sure to study your lessons, no? And of course, hindi rin mawawala yung mga situational na questions, katulad ng mga weekly assessment natin. So again, that ends today's discussion. Thank you so much for listening, for watching.